Mm.
Welcome. I'm Ron Oltmans of Lead Skill. This is the Self-Aware Leader. And I just welcome everyone who's watching or listening, tuning into our conversation here. It's going to be a good one today. Our topic is depression and leaders. And I'm joined by Angela Oltmans, who has agreed to share on a personal level from her own life, her story. And really our purpose in this whole episode is to shine a light on the issue of depression, and for people at work, especially leaders, to get on top of this conversation. And we just want to shed some light on it. We're not experts in the sense of therapists. We're not going to be talking about clinical depression on that level, but as a human condition, as a human issue that touches so many people today, I think it's important for us to bring this into the public and to normalize it. So thanks for joining us today. Angela, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome. So, where would you like to start?
Yeah, so depression, it's not what people want to talk about, is it? I mean, most people, I would say in quote polite conversation or in workplace conversations, when was the last time you heard people having a real conversation about depression?
Very seldom, or unless you're a very self-aware leader. And most of the time, this topic is only discussed and shared honestly when one hits the bottom, or when life presents you with something very tragic. I think that's when people are more willing to talk about how this emotion of depression and sadness or deep sorrow affects them. And that's where I find there's a lot of elegance in that kind of conversation, because people suddenly have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose anymore. So that becomes a very rich conversation.
Wow, I like the language you're using. Elegance, a rich conversation. It certainly is a reframing. It's different from the way we think of it normally. Depression seems heavy. It seems a little bit taboo. It's like, oh, not something I relish or really want to talk about. And like I said at the beginning, we aren't really trying to approach this as mental health practitioners or give the textbook definition of depression or whatever, but maybe we should try to at least throw
a definition,
a container or something around it. Like, what are we talking about with depression? What is this thing?
I've never really. Should we Google immediately? How do we use ChatGPT or what?
Well, okay, that would be
it's a prolonged sadness. Go ahead. Sorry. It's
I was
a
just going to
prolonged
say,
sadness.
Say that again.
It's a prolonged sadness.
Prolonged sadness. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's a starting point. Yeah. I don't think that a deductive kind of left brain approach, looking up Google, looking up a dictionary definition, is really the approach that is going to help us the most here. So a prolonged sadness. Yeah. So I think most people would understand depression linked to sadness, the emotion of sadness. So on our YouTube channel, we've actually had a video in the past where we looked at some of the words, the ways, the vocabulary of the sad emotion, that whole family. So prolonged sadness.
Can I also continue?
Yeah. Go ahead. Keep on.
Prolonged sadness. And so let me just describe a few things. It would be the sun could be shining and the birds are chirping. The sky is really blue and beautiful. And no matter how beautiful the circumstance and surroundings are, you still feel sad. That's what I mean by prolonged sadness. And it also is a period, a season, a chapter that could be very brief or very long for years. And it's when you are in that depressive state, it's like a storm that you are in, that you have to learn and train yourself to be in, not run away, avoid, with various good habits or addictions. You just have to learn to be with it. The more you let yourself, I let myself be with it, the more it loosens up, or sometimes it doesn't, and it goes away like a storm. So to give a little bit of brief history of my personal story, I was 17 when I suddenly found myself with lots of thoughts of taking my own life. I would imagine myself in my mother's kitchen. I remember this many, many decades later, of using a knife to wonder what's it like to slit my wrist. And I remember thinking, I'm only 17, I have a whole life ahead of me. In fact, I have stickers and notepads that says, your future is so bright, you need shades. And so to have these thoughts was very confusing and baffling to me. And coming from a Chinese Asian family, not much of this is talked about until many years later, when I did some research and conversations with family members, that I realized that this is something that many in my family actually have. So that has brought a little bit more understanding that this is not a character flaw.
Okay. Yeah. That's pretty heavy. And
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. No, I don't. And I think that's an important thing that we need to highlight, is that depression, as we talk about it, it's not something that you need to apologize for, especially the person experiencing it. I really appreciate you for sharing your personal story and opening up, because I haven't really battled depression. I mean, I've had bouts of depression. I've had times, but it's, I bring this back up that you were saying, you called it a prolonged sadness, or a season, a length of time. It's not just fleeting. And okay, so I have had a season or two of depression as I think back, but I wouldn't say it was very deep, or that I ever went to a dark place, like, thinking of harming myself, or, ending my life, or anything like that. So there's a scale here, right? There's different grades and depths of depression that you can be in. And so while I've had some depression, I would feel almost like I was in the shallow end. It wasn't a deep depression in my case. And what you're describing sounds a lot deeper and darker, honestly, than what I've experienced. And I don't think that there's any need for you to apologize for it, or anyone else who's listening to this. And I want leaders, particularly if you haven't had depression in your own personal experience, creating safety, what we call psychological safety, creating a place where people are safe to share or to express that. Now, that may not be like an everyday kind of, conversation. But if someone is struggling and they really just need some support, or, they kind of are opening the door and putting out a feeler and seeing are you a safe place for me to share about how much I'm struggling and how dark it looks, I would just say pay attention to the signs.
And you've been very good at that, Ron. I mean, I don't think when we got married, I thought it was an issue that I have. I think my second serious bout of depression came when I moved to the US. I remember that first year was really hard for me. I gave up my professional life. Everything that I worked so hard for, achieved so much, and received all the accolades suddenly mean nothing.
So that was about 4 or 5 years later, after this episode you just described.
Yeah.
And
I found a deeper faith in between that gave me new life. And I found spiritual faith and Christian faith. So yeah.
Well, let me ask this, Angela, if you don't mind, because I do know a little more of your story, and you talked about being like a, kind of a mature teenager. I say mature, 17 is, it's, you've been a teenager for a few years, but I know that you probably actually had first bouts of depression even long before that, because your own personal story of losing one of your parents, your father, at a young age.
Yeah, my father when I was
Would you
11,
say?
and
Yeah,
my father when I was 11, and my grandmother before. But yeah, but even then, I mean, you could do Jungian analysis of me, and
No. But my question,
Gestalt,
just a second. Let me just ask a
that.
question. I don't want to do analysis. I'm not even a Jungian or a therapist or anything. But my question is, did you, after, in the normal grieving process, I say normal, let's just say in the grieving process, after losing your grandmother and then the next year your father, would you say that you went into depression, or you were in a time of season of depression that lasted somewhat long, or
No.
at that young age not? Okay.
No, but before, even when I was under 5 years old, I can access memories of deep sadness. So this is something that I've done a lifelong work on. And
Okay.
so I've come to see that it is not it doesn't have to debilitate me. It's actually, for want of a better word that keeps trending, it's a superpower. Whether empathy is a superpower, I would say depression has been a gift for me. So I'm not afraid of it anymore. In fact, I welcome lots of conversations of people who are willing to talk about this, process their grief, process difficult things. So when I talked about coming to the US and leaving things, and I think I'm going to speak to a few leaders here, in which at one point in your life, you will be, your work, your title, your achievement, everything that you are will be gone just like that. Whether it's something that you did that you didn't expect that you did, that you have to have grown up into such a scale, or just life happens. That's what it is. And then it all goes away. But the heart of it is you are still a leader. You are still human, and you will meet depression. And the good side about depression is that there's a lot of good out of that. It drives you to explore some parts about you that you never give attention to. And one of the things that I didn't give a lot of attention and permission to is creativity. So even though I worked in the creative field and I allowed myself to be creative, but to say I am a creative human being. I'm created to be creative. I don't have to wear the label of a creative professional. I could be an engineer and still be and see myself as a creative human being just because of the codes that I write, or the things that I build. It's creative. I could be a mechanic. I could be, a landscaper, and the work I do is very creative. And when you have that kind of perspective in your life, there's nothing to prove really. You just feel good about what you produce, and what you make, what you create. So, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So the depression can actually bring gifts with it. And you mentioned a few, like creativity and like, I was going to say introspection, but it really is more of a deeper life perspective. It's an opportunity to look deeper into, what really gives life meaning and what is real, what's true. Because when you were referring earlier to depression being like a storm that comes over you, that has, I've learned that depression can actually be so disorienting. It can like unhinge you from reality in a sense, like, very strong compulsions, like you mentioned, whether it's self-harm or, just a strong feeling like no one understands, the world would be better off without me, you know, those sort of things that are like, they're not real, but they feel so true and so real that it's like, man, you know, it's a storm. And what we have to get out, I think, as a message is when people are experiencing severe depression, strong depression, they need an anchor. They need, even if it's a person, a coworker, a friend who will come along, you know, side and just be there with them, not giving them advice, not even, you know, telling them anything, but just being with them and reminding them about what's real and what's, you know, that it is a season, it's a storm, and there is calm after the storm.
So one of the things, because I've been in the shoes for such a long time, I don't prescribe like you need to try this pill, this drug, this supplement,
right,
this habit,
right,
and all those might help,
right,
and are useful.
And I guess it's the time for the caveat, which is like, you know, although we're not clinicians, we're not therapists and all that, we're not, you know, at all giving a knock to seeking out professional help. In fact, if you have strong depression or severe depression, you should, you know, get help. You should, you know, seek out whatever help is needed. And that may look like medication. It may look like, you know, some lifestyle changes, but, you know, you need to work through that sort of plan with a professional helping you. So we're not at all giving a knock to that. But Angela, you're sharing from your own personal experience, like that hasn't been the path that you've taken, is like using medication as one example.
No, I've tried certain medication, which the side effect is it helps with depression and it make me happier, you know, because I've got other health challenges, you know. I think where am I going with this? I think I've been hearing a lot more about depression being on the rise, and that's why I'm willing to come on and have this conversation and use it to shed light.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to that point. So as a collective, if there is an awareness, a deeper awareness and appreciation of this emotion that cripples some people, but at the same time, there are some who have a good facility at this emotion, then we perhaps can collectively help each other. So we do not know why we live in a time as such as this versus, you know, when the founding fathers were, and I happen to not be in that time. I happen to know this time that I live in, and I know that America that I belong to and the larger country, larger world that I'm in. And it's not just a first world issue, it's a human challenge that we happen to face, whether it's a pandemic brought it on or loss of someone dear, a certain kind of lifestyle, relationship. It is. We all either have experienced depression ourselves or know of someone that we care deeply about, or maybe even not care deeply about, simply an employee who happens to have gone through, who just unexpectedly has just through something very tragic and is in depression state. So if you're a leader, what is the best way to support? Not prescribing some pills, some medications, some lifestyle change, even those are very helpful. But what I've come to let you know, how do you help someone who's in that shoes? So let me tell you what has helped me. Can I go ahead and
sure, please do.
bring our conversation on that?
Yeah.
Non-judgment. So you've been very good at that, Ron. I mean, just like I didn't know that you have a heart valve situation going on when we first got married, but you were kicking in alive all those years. You know, you certainly didn't bargain for and know about this, but you have been very supportive. How have you been supportive? You listen. You come from a non-judgmental space, and that I appreciate. You don't come from like, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with me. It's just asking, like a tiger, why do you have stripes? You know, that's a ridiculous question. You give me the space, be, So when I'm super productive and efficient, you are trying to play catch up at times. But when I am just in this doldrums, I am in the doldrums. But one thing that I noticed that I found that's very useful is that you trust me that I can do life. So I can do life. I can pick myself up. I can continue. And when that happens, when I'm done with being with that emotion, I just spring back to life. And sometimes I sprint 100 times faster than most people, right?
Yeah.
So is it bipolar? Is it what? I really do not, tests could be run on me and on an endless track. But what I do know for sure is that this is interesting. It's made me a more highly sensitive person. Built in greater empathy. I never thought of myself as an empathetic person. I felt like being empathetic means dragging. Efficiency goes down. There's not much productivity. But those are mindsets, and that's archaic. We all now know that empathy matters, right? So what else can I speak to?
Well, let me just before we continue down that for a second, let me make sure we tag this. So you were saying what helps is expressions of trust or sincere hope, like just being there with the person, and like I believe you can get through this, and I'm here to help. I'm here to just be with you through this, and not hope in like a kind of vague or, cheer up, and things will get better. But sincere hope, when I say sincere, it's like, it's grounded in there's something, that real that the person can grab hold of. There's some reason to continue on and to expect that things can get better.
I heard a pastor once said, the deeper the grief, the fewer the words. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. The deeper the grief, the fewer the words. And what has helped often in that, when people is in that space in deep grief, just sitting next to the person is enough.
Yeah, I think we really undervalue that or underestimate the power of presence, of just being with a person, and that you don't have to say anything. So the example of Job, there's in the Bible character who is, got all this great wisdom and wealth and, big family. And then he's afflicted by Satan, and all that's taken away from him. And then he has these three friends show up who initially try to comfort. They sit with him for a week, and they try to, just be with him, which was great. Right. And then they open their mouth. and the more they talked, the more they went from support to that judgment, like you talked about, and saying, come on, Job, you must have done something wrong. Come on, just admit, confess, admit that you did something evil to deserve this, and God will forgive you. And it just becomes like this verbal sparring match, and it gets really nasty, at some point. And so the example of Job's friends is like, if they had just stayed, maybe sat with him for another week and kept quiet, and another week. But the power of presence and just being with the person going through depression, and I see you, just letting that message, and I'm here for you, versus needing to say something.
Two examples I could think of that's recent. Someone I know lost their husband to a tragic car accident this past May, leaving behind 3 children, 9, 7, and 2. I've been working with this professional friend for a season, and so we go deep into what's sad. But we also have moments where we laugh, talking deep stuff as we fold sheets, because there's not a lot of time, in a busy mom's life with young children. So we're folding bed sheets and talking deep, drinking tea, sharing good things and hard things. So it's the conversation. That's what I mean by the conversation could be very rich if you are willing to go into that place. And it takes courage. It takes you willing to give up your hang-ups about what you think is appropriate or inappropriate. Let your spirit guide you. And that's what I mean about depression being a gift, because it lets me become more in tune with the spirit that's inside me. That inner wisdom that some people talk about. You know what it takes. You know what needs to be done. That voice, depression is one of those emotions that allows you to go into that space of deeper awareness, deeper inner self-awareness, to become aware of what to say and how to say it. So maybe that's why I call it a superpower. It's different from happiness, right? Which we all want a lot of.
Yeah, you mentioned this just a moment ago before I jumped in, and you were going a little further down this, so I'll highlight it now. Another gift of depression is potentially it can build greater empathy in you.
Yeah.
That you come out of it able to appreciate the depths of what other people might be struggling with or experiencing.
Yes. So for instance, in my 20s, I built myself, having grown up in Singapore. If anyone has been to Singapore, you know how efficient and high functioning that society is. Everything runs with clockwork efficiency and very practical group of people. So when I came to the US, I prided myself in not being able to cry until I was in a conference one time, a seminar, and people started crying. And I looked around me, and I was in my 20s, and I was like, what in the world? Maybe because these are Americans that grew up in a different kind of environment from me. And so maybe that's why I do not have the emotion of the feelings of tears, or emotion of feelings so overwhelmed that I would tear. But something kind of like, tickled me and made me think like, what's going on here? Is it because I'm Chinese? Because I'm Asian? Because I'm from Singapore? Why do I not know how to cry?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do I really want to go through life? I'm only in my 20s for the rest of my life, not being able to be moved by something in which I could actually shed a tear. I mean, what kind of human being do I want to be? Is that a kind of human being I want to be, where I could go through life, listen to the deepest things and not shed the tear? And that's where it kind of like accelerated and open and kind of forced me to look at, am I willing to be human, to be fully human? And so I took that on. And you cannot have great joy, spirit, enthusiasm, if you have not touched the depths of what depression and sadness is. You can't have one or the other. It's very yin and yang. Yeah.
No, but wow. That's I think that's a really important perspective for people to hear, and especially for leaders to think about. I mean, I really do believe that we privilege the positive emotions, and the last 20 years, there's been a real emphasis on positive psychology, right? But, the happy emotions and the positive and upbeat. And so the notion of like that there's a strength and there's something to be gained from depression, from this deep sadness, from, walking with people through grief is like, I think is a helpful balance to bring, to the conversation. We really do grow through those times. And as a leader, you gain empathy by diving into some of those things that, on the face of it, it doesn't look very promising. It's not, something that you would think would contribute to the workplace, right? I think most leaders' instincts are, you kind of want to keep those heavy or those quote negative, dark emotions kind of on the fringe, or is like, oh, of course people go through that stuff, or, of course we want to show sympathy when people have a loss or they're grieving, but we don't really want to bring it into the workplace front and center. But you're saying there's something to be gained there, actually, something human.
And now I can see why you'd like me to talk about depression and leaders in this self-awareness, self-aware leader conversation.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I got you, because I suddenly I realized, Ron, there's, when you're a leader, aspiring leader, or when you're being a good leader, you have a pretty long runway in terms of, clinching all your achievements, accolades, successes. So, if there isn't any war in the place that you are placed in, or, just crazy economic downturn, you pretty much have a pretty good run in terms of building and creating a lot of success. And then sooner or later, you're going to hit a roadblock, whether you are financially retired out, or you are in your 17th venture, you will find, and all success in the world will not be enough. Yeah. And there's this sort of like an emptiness. It's kind of like a door open sign, a signal to you that if you don't take stock and kind of examine what's going on, it's not more is better or different is better. You have to, I think, almost like stop, just do nothing, and just look at, no, what am I not giving attention to? Maybe it's relationship. I just got a text from someone was very honest, sharing that, wow, this is a gentleman in his 60s finally saying, yeah, I now can see the mistakes and the impact I have on the people that I've loved. And that's taken a while for him to look at, to actually articulate it, and then admit it, share it. Yeah. And I have no judgment except the utmost respect that he has allowed himself to go into this space to share with another person and say, yeah, I realized I've messed up and I hurt a lot of people.
Wow. What else can we share with leaders, especially someone who wants to be a more self-aware leader, about how to be with people and how to welcome conversations about some of these things, whether it's depression or grief or some of these other, traditionally less welcome emotions?
I've been very fortunate. So you've been that kind of human being to me. So that's why we have a 30-year marriage. Yeah, and 2 sons. So amazing. So and what is your question again? So I'm just
okay. How about this? You and I have been.
Yeah.
You and I have started reading this book, not necessarily together, but we're at the same time recently. Maybe this is a good time to mention it to people. David Brooks published this book just a couple of months ago at the end of 2023 called How to Know a Person. And it's a great book. I do recommend it. And I would suggest in that book, you've got, just a number of good things. 3 sections of the book. I'll just, share this with you. How to Know a Person. And by the way, David Brooks is a journalist. If you don't know him or know of him, he's a journalist. He's not a therapist or a clinician. So, he's given me some, some encouragement about, jumping in or wading into this space and making this conversation more public. In this book, he talks about, first of all, just the power of seeing another person for who they are. And so the first part of his book, How to Know a Person, is I see you. And then the middle section, the second part of the book, is I see you in your struggles. And he talks about hard conversations. And particularly, I'm looking at chapter 10. How do you serve a friend in despair? And he does talk about depression. He opens up about having, people in his life who committed suicide, or, that, just dealing with that, the aftermath of that, and wondering, could I have said something, or could I have done something that would have made a difference for them so that we didn't have this, outcome? And he shares some helpful things in that chapter 10, how to serve a friend in despair. And, if you find yourself like wondering, what else can I do besides what you guys have mentioned, like, just being present with someone, or just allowing the conversation, being non-judgmental, he's got some great points in that book that will, help you grow in a little more empathy, and also maybe have some directions that you could take a relationship or a conversation, and how just being a friend. So of course, I mean, we think about people in depression and especially suicidal as like, oh, call the suicide hotline, which is great. We need that. It's kind of the most impersonal thing to say to someone is like, call the suicide hotline, because the fact is, if you know about it and you're in touch with them, you are the suicide hotline. You're probably more valuable to them in the moment than asking them to call the 1-800 number or whatever, even though they can get help from someone who's trained to work with people who are, contemplating suicide. But just being with a friend or someone who is willing to be there with you and to stick around and not like freak out or just kind of quietly, fade into the woodwork or whatever, get out of there as quick as you can. There's something that we can offer to people.
I will also add this. That's when you have the context of a relationship, then you can pick up the cues that the person is, in depression, or the person has told you that they're in depression. So as David was talking about his friend that they've known for decades. But what happens when you're in a place where you do not know the person? Let's say a CEO of 110 employees, or someone who's in charge of 10 teams, 5 teams, 10 seems ridiculous. And you do not know, but you can, the thing that I mentioned earlier about your spirit, your inner voice, that inner wisdom of yours, going to guide you. You tune yourself to that. And when you have depression, you cannot but help slow down and let your world go on pause. In fact, it is good to go on pause and not do more to get away from depression. And when you go on pause, you learn to hear that inner voice in a clearer way. Okay. So an example that I would say, that when you learn to hear your voice in a clearer way, your inner voice, you actually can practice empathy with anyone. And I mean anyone and everyone. So an example I'm going to give, because just now I mentioned about wanting to give 2 examples, is a homeless man that I met several weeks ago at a homeless shelter. He was waiting for his, what is the word they use there? He was waiting for this client to have an intake form. Apparently, a lot of nonprofits here, you have to go through certain intake forms before they can admit you for services. So while that was being done, I saw him at the shower station, and he was, kind of not sure what to do, and I wasn't sure what to do as well. It was new to me, but I noticed something about him that stirred something in me to go forward and have a word with him. I'm only 5'2", and this is a very tall, rugged gentleman in his 30s. And our eyes met, and it just took a brief second for me to study his face. And I, of course, say the 3 things of what needs to be done for him to get his shower and where to put the rest of the things. And then after that, I had a moment to process, and he has finished his work. As he was heading into the cafeteria to have his lunch, I I have a brief conversation with him. And I said a few words. I don't remember the words, but I trusted my spirit that moment to say what needs to be said to him. And he got it. And he was able to relax and not feel so nervous at his first time receiving help at this homeless shelter. So have I not had the journey that I have? I thought I would have the capacity and the ability to talk to someone so just, we never have met had I not been at that homeless shelter.
Yeah.
So we're all struggling. Everyone we meet is fighting a hard battle. So if we can just remember that, I think.
Yeah, that's powerful. You said you had 2 examples. Was there a second one to share?
Oh, the first example was with the young widow.
I see.
Yes. So this is the second example of another human being. The young widow, when I have a relationship with, so I know she has depression.
Right.
The homeless person I met, when I looked into his eyes, I know the heaviness of a heart. You know when someone's heart is heavy. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful because if as a leader you may not have a very deep relationship, or it's a very, very surface, a casual sort of, of the person, they're in your organization, but you don't have much personal knowledge of them.
Yes. Yeah.
And you may think that, well, I can't really step in, or it should be their supervisor who is helping them.
Yes.
But the fact that you are a leader,
yes,
it speaks volumes that you pay attention and that you notice them, because as a leader, it like amplifies the smallest thing that you do, just to acknowledge their presence, just to acknowledge that you are paying attention or that you notice something about them. So please, I'm speaking to the leaders, don't miss this. Don't underestimate the power of even small gestures or taking time. Hey guys, we're all busy, but it's like taking the moment and not losing it to just, do something, even the smallest thing to lighten the load.
You're right, exactly right. So in the 90s, when Colin Powell wrote My American Journey, I was so inspired that I tracked down his address to write him a personal letter to thank him, being from an immigrant background myself, and being the general and the outstanding human being and statesman, American citizen that he is. He took time to reply back to me. And back then, in my 20s, it left an indelible mark for me of what a true leader is. Taking time to say, I see you. I am thankful for your contribution. And let's do this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Very good.
Thank you.
I think this has been good, this whole conversation, and I hope that leaders who are watching this and have stuck around with us this far will, just take a flyer, take a moment to realize there are things that we all can do, and as a leader, your influence is actually outsized. It's even more powerful than you might realize, and it's okay to be awkward. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. As a leader, come on. I mean, we're used to doing uncomfortable things. We're used to, doing things that are a little bit scary. And so that includes, venturing into some of these conversations or some of these spaces, because we catch an inkling, or because we've heard so-and-so, just had a loss in the family, or this person has really been down, lately. And it's like just taking a moment to check on people and to be with them. It can be very powerful. And then I think your message too, Angela, about as a leader, if you haven't had experience with depression, it doesn't mean that you're not going to, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
another coach, an executive coach that I was talking to, who is focusing her practice on executives coming out of work, entering retirement. And I think that one thing, a lot of people going into that, life transition that they're unprepared for is how much of a gut punch it can be, the retirement. When you step out of the role, your social circle, the people that you've been around, the respect, all the things that go with, the working world. And, for some people, they think of retirement as, yay, yippee, I get away from all those people. But for a leader, there can be some real adjustments that you're not probably emotionally prepared for, about, your social circle shifts and changes, and the esteem that you had as, by virtue of your role or your position in the company is not there anymore. And, so there can be a season of depression, strangely enough, that comes with early retirement.
And like I said, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, because it starts having you just question about the bigger things in life. What really is your legacy?
And by the way, that's not just for old or elderly people. I've actually had people who took, quote, early retirement, who had a startup and they went really hard at it for 10 years and then they cashed out, and only to realize in their mid 30s or early 40s, that exact thing that I just described happened to them. It's like all of a sudden their social circle changed and their purpose and their reason in life shifted. And it's like no longer about building, they've already cashed out. And it's like, oh, I thought I was going to be suddenly happy and fulfilled because of all this. And now I'm it's a downer. In fact, if they're honest, there's some depression involved in adjusting to the new reality afterwards. So don't think that you're immune to this, even if you're not genetically predisposed, or through life circumstances you've not experienced very much depression up to this point.
Yeah, I hear you, Ron. I hear you, because in the end, whether you cash out in 30s or you are still going strong in your 70s, 80s, or even 90s, you start asking yourself the deep questions. What am I really here for? And what do I really, really want to leave behind? And who do I really, really want to support? And why?
I like a lot that question that you shared yesterday in a conversation we had with this other guy, and I wanted to share it here. We not that we came up with it, got it from David Brooks, but I really appreciated it, and I think this could be a potentially a question you could use even with someone who is experiencing a little bit of depression. But it's like the question is, what are we going to be celebrating a year from now? What are we going to be celebrating a year from now? And it doesn't have to be a big celebration, doesn't have to be a huge achievement. It may be, I got through it, or I'm still alive. I mean, whatever the answer is okay. And being safe, to say what that is. But what, that's, I think, an expression. That's one way to tap into what we were saying earlier about authentic hope or sincere hope, is having people kind of like not fixate on the storm that they're in right now swirling around them, but it's like, what are we going to be celebrating a year from now after the storm, when the storm has passed? That was very powerful, Angela, when you shared that metaphor, that analogy of depression being like a storm that you get caught in, and how after it passes, it's kind of like, oh, things clear up and you're able to see, things with more perspective than when you were in the midst of it. So is there anything else that maybe a question or something that we can say that might help people when they're in the midst of the storm?
Let someone know, reach out. So what will I be celebrating a year from now, to your question?
Mm-hmm.
For the purpose of this, conversation, and in this context, it will be a celebration and honor for me to be in conversation with leaders who are in this situation where we can process this. Ron and I, or I alone, or Ron alone, create safe spaces. We're not therapists, like we say, but we can create space and have conversations for you to be in the driver's seat, to talk out loud, to have exercises that take you deeper into places where you're never considered, and for you to process with people that you love, people that do not know much about you, so that you get a better handle on this emotion that is really a big gift.
Yeah.
On how to live fully and become fully alive. So this is something that I would find much to celebrate about if I could be of assistance to someone or a few people like that, or a group. So, yeah.
That's a great thing to share. And I can affirm you will definitely be deeply impacted if you have the opportunity to have a conversation with Angela, to take you deeper and to find yourself saying things that it's like, wow, did I actually say that? Did I find you heard the words coming out of your own mouth? And it's like, she has such a powerful way of eliciting and, evoking those things for people in a gentle, but, powerful way. So I would wish that upon a lot of people who are hearing this. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Ron.
I want to thank everyone for watching, joining in to the live stream. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to our channel here at LeadSkill. And these are the kind of conversations that we enjoy having with leaders, whether we're doing that one-on-one, whether we're leading a team or a group conversation, or whether we're doing live casts like this for the public in this kind of a format. So thanks for joining us for this part. And we look forward to connecting with you. If we haven't done that before, drop us a line or give us a comment. Let us know what impacted you or how this helped. And we look forward to being in touch in the future. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for introducing the topic, Ron.
You're welcome.